Yo, yo, what is going on, everybody? It is Brave Cat here with a weekly earthquake update with some volcanism sprinkled in. So, there is quite a bit to cover during this last week. Let's go ahead and take a look at the last 7 days through the USGS 2.5 and greater. So, there was another 7, mid range 7 that happened in the Drake Passage. So that's kind of interesting. To have one big earthquake strike down here is one thing, but to have another strike down here just like that, and we already see tons of aftershocks down here, so it was quite a big one. It reported at a 7.6, originally a 7.8, so pretty big here, and we see, the pressure going off into the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. And then the Philippines. Oh my goodness. Prayers going out to the Philippines because, well, we can't even see. There's just been so much. So there was like a 7. Let's see if we can take a look at this here. So there's 7.4 that struck. And most of this looks like it's off the coast. So tsunami warning, but since it's in the water, not as much destructive potential than if it happened right on land. But still, again, we see lots of aftershocks here, including two sixes, so a 6.7 and a 6 aftershocks, like immediately after. So that place is getting absolutely tossed. The Indo-Australian plate overall has been just extremely active. So if we go back here, and we can also see there's been quite a few deep earthquakes. The ones in red are older, the ones in white are more recent, so there's deep earthquakes happening here basically every day. That definitely brings an influx into what we're going to see going across the plate. Quick shout out again to Dutchsinse for this overlay, this map overlay that I'm using. Credit goes to him, and credit for the Earthquake 3D program goes to Richard Walton, so those will be in the description. So anyways, I think I'm going to cover probably the West Coast first, just to get that out of the way. It's, there's some pressing concerns here, and there's been talk over really the past few months, but even more so now, about a mega quake happening in California or somewhere on the West Coast. We've been seeing increased activity off the coast of Oregon, and if we look at the activity we've seen, there's kind of an interesting pattern here. So pay attention to these tremors and these clusters. So let me bring up the 0.0 and greater for the last 7 days. And so let's take a look at these tremors. Okay, so here they are. Zeros, ones, and twos are going to be considered tremors here. And there's a lot, and it's there's usually tremors happening on the West Coast, but obviously there's probably been a little bit more than we're used to because of everything that we're seeing across the board. So more tremors, but more importantly, take a look right here. So off the coast of Oregon, not too long ago, there was a 5.9 that struck. So bigger activity, and this is about right where it was. So if we take a look at this view really quickly here, so we can see the plate boundary. So this right here, this very complicated part of the plate boundary off the coast is what I'm talking about. This is where the 5.9 struck. And if you notice, it's like a quiet zone right here in terms of tremors. We see the tremors down here. We see the tremors up here, and there's way more to go through here on the tremor map. But so it looks like where the activity off the coast of Oregon is happening is right in the middle of the quiet zone between all of these tremors. So that's something to take note on. So if we use the combination of what we see here, because it shows everything in California, some of the stuff up north, and then we take that and kind of combine it with this because, well, for some reason, the tremors that you see here don't show up here. I'm not sure why, but regardless, this is what we need to look at here. So this is what the tremor map's been looking like for more than a week now, where all these tremors, like today, 600 in one day. That's pretty gnarly. And so, the vast majority of them are happening right up here at the border between, Canada and the US. So let's take it back a week, just one full week. And yeah, there's just a ton. Like, this is where pretty much all the tremors on here are happening. And so it's like, all the pressure from the Pacific Northwest and from the Indo-Australian plate is just slamming this subduction zone here. And, the tremors are releasing pressure, so that's a good sign. But then, the fact that there's so many, is also kind of a point of concern. So we've got all these tremors up here, and we've got all these tremors down here. And then we have this quiet zone. So, we've been seeing activity off the coast, and there's been talk of what they're calling a rare super shear earthquake. So, like, this video is from 4 days ago, and then you have some more of the same talk from like a month ago, May, and so on. So that is definitely something to be aware of. Absolutely. If you live in any of these areas, or if you know anybody that does, really on any of these plate boundaries, anywhere, it's good to have a plan. For sure, pay attention to, what's going on, because, what happens on one side of the plate can affect the other. So, we see, again, with the Drake Passage, let's just kind of bring that up as a pretty good example here. First, let me switch back to this feed, because there's like a billion earthquakes and tremors trying to populate. So let's go back to the 2.5 and greater. So, Drake Passage, South America, down here. So, the opposite side of the planet is, well, Kamchatka. So, and we're still seeing, like, just look at this, right? So we're still seeing just as much activity as we've been seeing for weeks on end. And a lot of the other, like, people covering this sort of stuff are just as surprised to see this still happening. We would have thought this would have started to taper off by now, but instead it's just continuing. And it looks like, from here, there's actually a cluster of these mid-size, 4s and 5s happening on land, like right on the coast. Most of them are here right in the plate boundary. Let me switch back to this view. So yeah, most of them are happening on the plate boundary itself in the water. But now it looks like we're seeing some of them pop up right on the coast. And there is a whole range of volcanoes here that have been just kind of popping off like whack-a-mole. One goes off, another one goes quiet. One goes quiet, and then the other one goes off. So that's kind of what's been happening there. And so, again, with what we see here, let me go over the volcanism, because that's also been pretty tremendous. So I have a few more pulled up on Google Maps. This has not really updated fully, so it takes like a week or two. I think every 2 weeks or so is when this updates. So there's nothing really too new here to look at, but there has been some even newer developments, and these are mostly going on over here in South America. So if we again take a look at the last 7 days, there's actually been less earthquakes happening here than what we've been seeing. But that seems to be made up for the fact that there's new volcanic activity happening. So there's a few to watch out here for. So this one here, Laguna del Male, probably butchering that. This one has been dormant for about 2,000 years. But we've been seeing a recent uptick in activity there. So it's gone from green to yellow. So it's kind of, warning mode. And along with two other volcanoes around here that may have some issues. So I got some pulled up here. So there's a couple of others in Alaska. But if we take a look at these here, so this is the other one. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. Tinguiririca? Yeah, I don't know. This is down here. We're looking at kind of the border of Chile and Argentina. So if we go here, yeah, these two right here kind of right next to each other. Oops, what just happened? Okay, luckily I can control Z. I think I dragged the marker away. But here's this one. So I think there might actually be 3 in total. Because then, let's see, what was it? This? Whatever lake. So this one's a lake, right? So I'm not exactly sure the details on this volcano, but it might be below the lake or somewhere around it. But either way, this is the one that's kind of weird, is it hasn't erupted in 2,000 years, and seeing some activity there. So there's 3 separate volcanoes happening down here that have just started to see some sort of activity, whether it be like just an ash plume or something like that. And then if we go up here, so there's the Great Sitkin volcano. This one's up in the Alaska chain. This one is having some newer activity, as well as Mount Shishaldin. So this is closer to Alaska, still in the chain of islands. So yeah, these ones here, this whole area between Kamchatka and Alaska here, like there just seems to be so much going on. And it's kind of reflected in what we see, the potential-wise on the West Coast. Is like, all this is going on over here, and it's affecting the whole plate boundary over here. So there's been a lot of movement, a lot of pressure, and there is potential for a larger quake in California or, somewhere on the West Coast. But, I mean, everyone's talking about California is where it's going to happen. But it's like, there's stuff going on up here too, so it's just a thing to keep in mind. Really, like anywhere along that coast could see potential. So yeah, no, things are not stopping. Things are getting even more increased, and yeah, it's pretty wild. It kind of brings me for a loss of words sometimes. Like, I can look at it, I can tell you what's going on, but then it's like, after that, I'm like, wow, like, I don't even know what to say after that. So let's just go through some of these other feeds here. I kind of blew through a lot of that, but, that's kind of what we got going on. So let's see if we can take a look at Europe. I think this is the one that we want to see. No. The middle one here. Okay, this one looks pretty relevant. So again, we see a lot of activity happening in Western Turkey, but then also a newer uptick of activity here in Eastern Turkey. So yeah, this is around where Göbekli Tepe is. And yeah, it's spreading through Europe here. Nothing major, 2s, 3s, going all the way up into the Arctic Circle. So it's quite a wide area to see this much pressure coming in pretty equidistantly. And then I didn't even see this. Huh. Interesting. Well, let's look that up right now. So what's going on over? Oh my god, I hate the European feed. Please. Oh my god. Okay, well, hopefully it shows up here because, for some reason the USGS feed is the only one where you click on it and then bam, here's the coordinates that work, directly into Google Earth. Nice and easy. So there we go. At least it was on the USGS feed, but I have not seen this yet. I just I guess I must have skimmed past it or something. So this is where it looks like there's just a seemingly completely random swarm of quakes happening here in the middle, the eastern side of Africa. Oh, Ethiopia, yeah. Okay, so no, I actually did see a couple of these pop up when I was looking at the list of earthquakes. And okay, so we'll go over this here in a minute. But let's take a look at what's going on in Ethiopia. This might require some more research because this seems a little bit out of left field. I don't really know what the reason is for just a swarm to just kind of appear. Pretty significant swarm. We got, mid to upper range 4s and 5s. So, that's not small. And I have a feeling there's not going to be much we can really get from here. Now, if we go back to this view... Okay, so it is right where the this plate boundary is. Now, so I'm really not familiar with this area at all, geologically. So, I mean, look, it's like the plate boundary just kind of stops and then it picks back up. I mean, you would think that plate boundary would just continue right through here. But anyway, so, okay, it is close to a major fault boundary. So that kind of gives us a bit of a clue is okay, there's at least, something there. So this is where that is. Interesting. So just kind of take a look at the geology from this satellite view and just kind of make inferences, just be okay, we see, a lot of these areas here seem to have a lot of tectonic kind of evidence going on, where there's plate movement, mountains forming. It looks kind of like there is, some complications here in the plate. But right here, what exactly, why did it choose this spot for the energy to release? Because that's how earthquakes work. The pressure comes in through the plate, under the plate, around the plate, and it will take the path of least resistance, similar to how lightning and electricity works. A lot of the same principles come in play here, where these earthquakes will seek the path of least resistance. So that's why, we investigate these areas when they happen, because it's okay, what kind of clues do we have to be okay, is there a weak point in the crust? Is there a volcano? Is there, what's here that could potentially cause this energy to be released? So again, I don't know enough about this area to really say anything about it, and I'm not an expert to begin with, okay? I'm just passionate about this subject, and as it seems, pretty important to pay attention to this stuff. I think in terms of what we're seeing globally, whether it be earthquakes, whether it be other weather events or phenomena happening, I mean, it's kind of all hands on deck. Anybody who could help bring awareness and cover these things helps in some way. And so I feel this drive to make these updates, even though I'm not an expert, so take it with a grain of salt. All for educational purposes. Do your own research. There's a lot of people that say, oh, trust the science, trust the science. That's not how science works, okay? You don't trust the science, you question it. That's what science is. You're questioning how reality works. Even if you think you know the answer, you're still questioning it because there's still more things to test. All right, there's still more things. Just there's nothing wrong with constantly questioning things. So yeah, just kind of keep that in mind. We always got to be vigilant, especially in all these kind of frontier levels of science here. Even if we find evidence for things, again, we still have to question it and dig deeper. And that's what I do. So anyway, that pretty much covered most of it here. I haven't seen really much else going on, like Australia, for example. It's hard to really know for sure because you know how reporting agencies are. They're not always the most transparent. So again, we see the Indo-Australian plate, lots of activity, and not so much here in Australia itself, which is a good sign. We don't want to see, big quakes popping off around here. So hopefully it stays like that. But, really the main focus here is the Philippines. This is tremendous. And this isn't like we've had 6s and 7s popping off left and right. And so that'll kind of bring me into this, where I'll kind of end things off. So this is a search result for 6.0 and greater activity ever since about June. So June through October 2025. This is the 6.0 and greater activity we've been seeing. So back in June, some 6s here. Alaska, Japan, so even one Mid-Atlantic Ridge. Let's see, down here again by the Drake Passage. So kind of go through the list here. Here's one 7.3 in Alaska that happened July, and then Kamchatka. So 6.6, 7.4, another 6, a bunch of 6s really. Another one in Alaska, another one there, and then down here in Indonesia. So we just kind of go through this list here just in the last 4 months, and this is like basically record breaking. Without actually going into, comparing all the data, which, I did actually, use ChatGPT a couple weeks ago to kind of sort through the activity and see if we've been seeing any uptrends. And by the end of this year, it seems obvious that this year is going to absolutely shatter records for volcanoes and earthquakes. If that doesn't show up apparent in the data, then there must be something fishy going on, because it's like, even for a complete amateur, as for myself, looking at this, I can clearly see that there's more activity going on now than we've ever seen. So here's that 8.8 that happened in Kamchatka. That's, I think, the biggest one that's happened this year. And so that's been popping off. That was July. That was the end of July. And that was, weeks into seeing these 6s pop up with the 8.8, the aftershocks from that, and then the repeated 7s that happened up here. So, it's just tremendous. It's like, it's so obvious that even someone like me is looking at what's going on and being like, yo, dude, something ain't right. So we had that Drake Passage 7.5 back in August, and then, we had a bunch more activity going on the opposite side again. And then 6.4 in Vanuatu. Again, more stuff going on there. We got Papua New Guinea, Indonesia. Again, the Indo-Australian plate has been getting attacked by earthquakes. These main areas here, just in the past 4 months of 6.0 and greater activity, you can see some of the major kind of, problem areas, so to speak. So, even like, Japan ain't safe for this stuff either. That's actually kind of in one of the watch zones right now, is Japan, because we see all this activity in the Philippines, all this activity up here, and look at what's right in the middle, Japan, along with the deep earthquakes that happened. So, as I'm wrapping things up here, kind of going back and forth, here, another deep earthquake south of Japan. So between all this activity here, we do want to warn Japan as well as the West Coast, and even potentially for Central and South America. So, yeah, lots of stuff going on, eyes open, volcanically, seismically. So, that'll about wrap it up, though. I don't want to keep going when I pretty much covered everything that I wanted to cover. So again, though, this is like what we've seen in the last 4 months, and again, another mid to upper range 7 in the Drake Passage. So, having one happen here, that's one thing. Having another happen here, that is a reason for speculation. Oh yeah, and I have this little cat here in the corner. You probably noticed that. I kind of forgot. But anyways, though, that'll do it for this one, and hope y'all having a good one, and I'll see you all in the next one.